me. Ready?
Hello everyone, Pantoufleee here today for a new video in which we're gonna see the top 15 tanks from the tech tree that are definitely worth keeping in your garage, because most of the time when we rush tier 10s we tend to sell all the single tanks from the branch in order for us to keep only the tier 10, but it's a mistake because there are several tanks from the tech tree that are very good, starting with the ARL-44, the tier 6 French heavy tank. This tank features an amazing gun, an amazing mobility and an amazing armor. Everything you need to have an amazing game. It's probably the best tier 6 out there if we count off the premiums and the collectibles, and it's truly one of the best heavy tanks tier to tier combined. If you remember, I talked about the tank in the best tanks per nation, talking about France, and I want to say that again. It's definitely the best tank of the French tech tree. The second one we're going to talk about is the Shido SPG, which is the tier 7 tank destroyer from the Japanese tech tree. This tank is on this list because it has an average mobility and a really good gun, but what is really important to understand is how crazy your armor profile is with this tank. As you're extremely angled and armored at the same time, when you're facing tanks from the same tier or even one tier below, they are gonna bounce literally every single shells. As long as you keep hiding the lower part of your hull, you should be set up for a bouncing festival. Moreover, the armor profile of the tank makes it extremely noob friendly because you will not get punished for your mistakes all the time. So if you want to play it well and have some fun, just hide your lower plate, make sure to follow the matchmaking where you're facing tier 6 and tier 7s, and you're gonna have a lot of funny games. Number 3, the Black Prince, the tier 7 British heavy tank. This tank is on this top simply because overall, even before getting buff, it was an amazing tank, but after the buff it received, I think it was on the armor profile but also the DPM, it's just a monster in terms of DPM. You have a pew pew gun, so you're not gonna scare a lot of people, of course, but trust me, when you see the kind of DPM it has more DPM than most tier 8s and some tier 9s, so just imagine how deadly you are when you are in tier 7. If you combine that amazing armor and that amazing gun, you have a deadly tank. Of course, the only problem with this tank is the mobility, so be aware that when you go on the side, you really need to know what you're doing, because it's gonna be really hard for you to go from side to side, especially with this kind of mobility. But even if you're facing alone 3-4 tanks, as long as you know how to angle your tank and that these tanks don't have a really high penetration, you're gonna be the king of the hill and you're gonna simply destroy them. Always make sure to shoot at tracks with this tank, especially against mediums, to avoid being circled. Staying into the British line, we're talking about the Comet, the tier 7 medium British tank. This tank is among the most popular one concerning World of Tank Blitz, but also World of Tank PC, simply because it has everything to seduce the average player. You have an amazing turret armor when it comes to hull down, combined with a great gun depression, which makes it flexible on pretty much every single terrains. If you combine that with your mobility that allows you to take aggressive positions at the beginning, and your pew pew gun that of course doesn't do a lot of damage in terms of alpha, but still with the amazing DPM you have makes it a really deadly tank, you have one of the best tier 7s in the history of World of Tank Blitz. It's definitely worth getting as long as you know how to play and what hull down is, because that's the main strength of the tank and what makes it relevant as a tech tree to keep. Number 6, the Cromwell, for the exact same reasons as the Comet from the tier 7 that we just talked about earlier. The main difference between the Comet and the Cromwell is that on the Cromwell you can't literally count on your armor. You don't have any, not even in a gun mantlet like it's the case on the Comet. So be aware that with the Comet you can hull down and bounce shots, with the Cromwell you can't. But it's still one of the best, if not the best tech tree tank at tier 6 when it comes to mediums. Of course, if you have to choose between the Comet and the Cromwell, you should keep the Comet because it's basically a Cromwell on steroid. But if you don't want to bother, just take both of these and you're gonna have fun in both. Number 6, the RU-251. This tank was mostly popular back in the days because we didn't have the Bulldog implemented yet, but now with the Bulldog things are a little bit different, because the Bulldog is actually doing the exact same thing as the RU, but with the premium status allowing you to earn more credits. But the RU is still really competitive and I'm gonna tell you why. This tank has an amazing mobility, probably the best mobility out of all the light tanks at tier 8. That's the first thing. You don't have armor, of course, you're a light tank, so nothing really new here, but you have an amazing gun. This gun features 100mm of HE penetration, and with 100mm of HE penetration at tier 8 facing sometimes tier 7, you're gonna have a lot of fun. If you shoot only HE with this tank and manage to penetrate, you have 310 alpha damage, which is really a lot regarding your reload time. It will allow you to do great things on the battlefield, having a lot of fun, and also the fact that HE shells have more chances of damaging modules make it a perfect tank to fire and also for ammo racks. Staying on German tanks, let's talk about the Tiger I, the tier 7 German heavy tank. What I love about this tank is that before its buff, it was just an okay tank. But now that it got buffed, especially on the armor and HPs, it's one of the deadliest tier 7s. Unlike the Black Prince, this tank features everything. You have an amazing armor, an amazing penetration, an amazing gun dispersion, an amazing gun in general, and an amazing mobility as well for its armor. It's cool because it will allow you to relocate, making the tank relevant and versatile. If you want to go on the medium side, fighting mediums, as long as you angle, you can. If you want to go on the tank destroyer side, as long as you angle, you're fine. Except if they are tier 8s, of course. But most of the time, the Tiger I is a tank you're gonna have fun with because you're not gonna get punished for your mistakes, as the tank is literally at its peak in terms of alpha. It's the alpha Chad, the mega Chad of tier 7 in my opinion, with the Smasher. And that's probably why this tank is on the top, to be fair. Number 8, the Yak Panther II. In my opinion, this tank is really underrated because we don't see that much of them on the battlefield, and also because as it was a tank that was here for a very long time, nowadays people tend to not play it anymore, and I think it's a mistake. Because with this tank, you have everything you need as an aggressive player to play correctly. Why? You have an amazing mobility, and not like the regular mobility of a good tank destroyer. I mean, here you go around 55 to maybe 60 kilometers per hour sometimes. It's a medium mobility. You combine that with an amazing gun that does 440 alpha damage with a great reload time, which allows you to have an amazing DPM, and you mount the whole on a big fat hull that is impenetrable as long as you show your casemate only. So with this tank, as long as you do that, you hide your whole tank and show only the upper part, which is the casemate where the gun is mounted, you are invincible. Nobody can penetrate you, and it's just a blessing, and it's so much fun when you find that perfect position to destroy literally everything. You're gonna get ace tankers guaranteed. So yeah, I love that tank. That was one of my first tanks to enrich because I love it, and oh boy, if I could enrich it one more time, I will. Sticking to tier 8 and to Germans, let's talk about the Tiger II. You all know why this tank is here. Since it got buffed, it's literally impossible to penetrate it frontally. You need to load gold shells, you have an amazing gun, an amazing armor, and the mobility is not that bad considering its overall armor. It's pretty much the same as the Tiger I, but one tier higher, and I don't even have to talk about the tank and tell you why it's in the top. If you don't know why this tank is in this top, it's either you're a newbie and you just started the game, or you never had the chance of playing the Tiger II. And in this case, I can encourage you, that's all I can do, to play it and to keep it, because this tank is as effective as its camo is beautiful. So trust me, it's a beast at tier 8. And the cool factor about the whole branch from the Tiger II to the E100 is that literally the whole branch is OP. You start with the VK, which is broken. Now after you have the Tiger I broken, Tiger II broken, E75 broken, and E100, which is a good tank. So yeah, definitely worth getting and definitely worth grinding the whole line. Number 10, the Yak Panther, the tier 7 German tank destroyer. This tank is here because, as pretty much all the tanks in the top, it features an amazing gun, an amazing mobility, and an amazing armor. I want to remind you that this tank got buffed as well, especially on the armor, and Wargaming really didn't do it wrong. They did it perfectly. They just allowed this tank to be suitable on the battlefield and be a bunker on tracks. If you're facing tier 8s, it's gonna be hard because they can penetrate you, but as long as you're facing tier 6 and tier 7s, you are gonna wreck them all without them being able to respond back. The only weak spot you have, two weak spots you have. I would say, even if your frontal armor is extremely good, you need to be aware that your side armor is inexistent, so always stand straight in front of your opponents. And also the lower part of the hull is the weak spot, so if you are showing it to your enemies, they are going to penetrate it, so make sure to hide it as long as possible. And another great thing is probably its penetration. As long as you load gold, you can probably go through pretty much everything, which makes it lovely and not so hard to play. Number 11, the T-30, the Tier 9 American Tank Destroyer. There are several things that makes me play this tank. The first one is how versatile it is. You have a fully traversable turret for a tank destroyer combined with an amazing gun depression. It makes it perfect for nearly every single map in this game. You will never struggle finding a good position with it. That's the first thing. The second one is I literally love the playstyle. Being held down without nobody being able to penetrate you and just smashing some 640 alpha damage on whatever is in front of you, it's lovely as well. And finally, the thing that makes me really play this tank is how easy it is for you to play it. Just find a position on each map where you can show your turret only and not the rest of the tank, and your setup. Just do that on repeat again and again and again. My only regret with this tank is the fact that it's impossible for the moment to enrich it permanently, because if it was the case, I can tell you it would be the first thing I would do when logging into the game. Number 12, the T-49, and it's here for the fun factor. Overall, the tank is not that great, let's face it. I know a lot of people tend to overhype over the T-49 because it does 800 damage, but I want to remind you, you have a really bad accuracy. You're taking ages to reload, and compared to all the other light tanks, you are weak. It's only situational, but just over the fact that you can put 800 on whatever is in front of you, that's what makes it a perfect tank to play and a really fun one. That's the only reason why this tank is on this top. The derp gun combined with the amazing mobility that can allow you to surprise your enemies. Unlike the other light tanks, with this one you actually have a fear factor, because putting 800 on your targets will make them think twice before pushing you. Number 13, the Hellcat, the Tier 6 American Tank Destroyer. This tank features an amazing gun for Tier 6. You have an amazing alpha damage, an amazing reload, amazing gun dispersion, accuracy, penetration. Everything is perfect, but it's mounted on something a little bit special. You have a fully traversable turret, same as the T-30, and also an amazing mobility. That's what makes this tank great. The fact that with this kind of mobility, you can take aggressive positions. You can be where your enemies are not gonna expect you. And it gives it this original playstyle that makes it not boring to play, unlike pretty much all other tank destroyers. It's not just like you stay in your bush and you camp with this one, no. You gotta play it like you were a medium or even a light tank sometimes. And that's this original playstyle that made me want to keep the tank in the first place. Number 14, the T1 Heavy, the Tier 5 American tank. I hesitated putting this tank or not in this top, as in my opinion Tier 5s are not so fun, but I thought, hey, you know what, don't be selfish. A lot of people actually love seal clubbing and playing tier 5, so why not talking about one of the most effective tier 5s to seal club in the history of World of Tanks Blitz, that is Tech Tree, and this is the T1 Heavy. I remember back in the days this tank sucked, but as Wargaming decided to buff it, they literally made it completely broken in terms of armor, especially when you're facing tier 5s. When you're facing tier 6, it's a little bit different, like here on this replay for example, I can't really push through, but when you're playing against tier 5s, if you hide your lower plate, you're gonna just destroy and annihilate whatever is in front of you. This tank features good armor, good gun and good mobility, that's why it deserves its place in the top Tech Tree tanks to keep. And finally, the last tank to keep is probably the T2580, the Tier 7 Tank Destroyer American tank. You feature an amazing gun with an amazing mobility, with an amazing armor. I love this tank. I literally love this tank. I love to play it, even if I don't play it a lot, because in streams nobody asks me to play it. Set Pantoufleee noise, but you get the spirit. If you combine all of that with an amazing gun depression, it makes it really versatile. Just be sure to not show your side armor as I did here with the Tiger, because you're gonna get destroyed, and you're set up to do OP games most of the time. This top is now over. I hope it will help you finding the tanks you want to keep in your garage and those that are actually worth getting in your garage, for those of you who want to grind them as well. Feel free to tell me in the comments your top tanks to keep from the tech tree, of course excluding tier 10s, because tier 10s are not to be mentioned in this kind of video. I hope to see you soon in a new video, and have a good day.